is getting a lot of response from the users and the customers. The fact that we have done some solid homework with respect to how we approach this particular problem, and this is a specific background that we have taken this to be able to build or come to the place that we are in. So this is the agenda. So I'm going to talk about what it means to building products in, and from our organization or the company that I've worked with for quite some time, having to transition from being a tester, and how did I realize to becoming a product owner, or owning up the entire product development, and how did we actually realize to start working on some product as a whole, and then what is the approach towards building the product, and talk about MVP being a most important topic um, that usually stands in the product development life cycle and the kind of companies that's been starting up, and also the important factor being the team, and what kind of team that we pick up and how do we do it, and then the go-to-market strategy. Although I couldn't get a lot of time building this particular presentation, but I think I'm going to talk more about it so people can learn, and then they can ask me questions over the end of the slides. So
Okay,
moving
once
on.
again, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you. So anytime any person could ask you any question, or after all presentations, all slides?
I think we could start off with the basics. I think once we get an idea of probably a couple of slides, I think it's good to be in an interactive way. But then I would wait for how do I close this? Okay, yeah. So I'll wait to take up the questions after probably few slides to go through. If that,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So thanks for people who are dropping the questions. I'm happy that happy to take up the questions. Probably few slides, because I think there are some things that would have been answered by the time we go through a couple of slides, right? So I'm going to quickly talk about building products of what we think, and what could be according to what building products is all about. On the left side of it, you see what we think about building products is to we have an idea, we get a team, and we start building the product. Take it to the market, and then figure out, okay, there are things that are missing out, and pivot it. And then there are most of the things where we don't build the product, but we react a lot to the customers, where the customer starts asking, can you do this to me, can you do this to me, can you do this to me, and then the product takes a different approach altogether, and the product is not product itself, it becomes a project. And then we start generating revenues, and then we pivot it again, and we see a lot of opportunities. That's where most of the places we think, and the startups are failing at multiple stages, is the fact that we tend to course correct, but we also think there is a lot more opportunity in a different places, and then start doing things in a way where it's not strategic, and probably think that this is a good market and the customer is asking for this, and that's the approach that we need to take. But product means slightly bigger than that, is to do a lot of research. So on the right side, what I meant is all about, this could be one approach that we can take to building any product. So if you're at the very initial stage, or of your career, or if you're looking at building products, or people who have already built products, and if you're a product manager, so we have to think differently, and we become our sole entrepreneurs of the product itself. Although the management takes care of defining the vision and the mission of what we need to head towards, but then we become owners of a lot of things that comes in. So starting from, if you have an idea, so assume that this is a feature. Probably idea is a feature that we have to get started off with. We look at how many users are going to use it, what is the need of the market, and if you have good analytics in place, you get to take pointers out of it. Similar way, any product that we started with, we have to get some data out from the market to understand whether is there a need for the market for products like this, and then do a lot of research. For example, if you go to product hunt, um, and then look for a specific topics, you get a lot of products that you can browse and learn about. And that's what we are talking about here, in terms of the market need and in terms of the value proposition of how are you going to place your product in the verticals of the competitors and the kind of areas that you are targeting. And then build a small prototype, and taking it to the customers initially to get as much clarity as possible to get started off with anything, even it being building a product, or if you're building a small features. It makes a lot of sense to go through this cycle of having to question and understand the data, the statistics that comes out of the analytics and everything, to be able to start doing something. That's what I meant on the right side could be the place where we could take this route in order to make it much more compelling for us to convince the customer to start using it and see a lot of product traction coming in. So this is what I think is about building products, and when it comes to the not a traditional way of looking at things, but then being a little more conservative, being a little more cautious of what we're going to build. And jumping into the next thing. So before I start talking about how we started in terms of the cycle that we started with, identifying what product that we need to build. This is how the journey looked like for me. So in the 2014, I started as a software tester, been in the, so I still test products, so it is a very good value add even in the product that I am building right now. It makes a lot of sense. And being a developer, you get to have your own pros and cons. So while I was doing this, I started building an app for that is based out of NFC, near field communication. So that time there are devices which came out with NFCs, but there was no application being that was utilizing this specific feature. That's when I see the gap of building an application that probably might use NFC to do something with it. So that's when I started building this app that talks about sharing profiles of different social media through NFC. Let's say if you're in a conference, it just takes a tap to get your contacts to someone else. So as simple as that. So I actually built this product. I launched it. I actually gave away the product to someone, so they continued on. But then I started to work on building a product for testing itself, which is an automation platform for all kind of applications. Which is called Abilash. So where I've been using this opportunity to talk to a lot of customers. So I've probably given more than 200 plus demos over the course of understanding what exactly need to be understood by the customers in terms of solving this particular automation problem for testing. So during this course, there was one constant question that was coming, is to ask, hey, can you help me with this, which is what the product which we built today. And over the 200 plus 300 plus interviews and the demos and the customer chats that we have had has brought down to a single question that constantly kept showing up in a different ways, to be able to say that this is how these are the questions that's being asked by the customers. And then We started our market research during the same time, where based on the customers that we worked with, based on our understanding of the space, that being a testing company, we understand that there's a lot of scope for this particular product that we have built. And then we started working on a small proof of concept, the prototype that we are talking about, where we actually took the prototype, started doing a lot of interviews. I'll show you the entire life cycle over the next few slides, but then we started doing a lot of interviews, and we started to build a lot of connections with the potential customers that we think are going to use this product, to be able to understand whether it makes sense for us to do something like this. And then we launched the product. We launched the product a month before. I think February 1st is when we launched the product. We have been getting a great response. We've been able to add a lot of active users. They've been able to adopt the product. We've been able to make quick changes. And since we have some learnings in the past, it made us easier to adopt to the things that the customers are asking, and then we could show the roadmap to them of how our products is shaping up, right? So moving on to the next slide is how did we realize to actually build product. The previous slide I spoke about the kind of customers that we have been speaking with, and the products that they have been using to solve their problems. And that's where we realized that, okay, there is a great opportunity for us to have a product that serves our customers, and also as a whole, of what exactly the product looks like. The product that they wish they could have to solve their issues in terms of the product development life cycle during the testing times. So that's when we realized that it hit us hard, that there's potential opportunity for us to get started off with how we're going to build the product. So moving on, of how did we approach to start off with the product, is the fact that this one thing that is very, very important, is the fact that finding the problem statement. This is where the entire world tells, okay, it's important to know your customer's pain point, which is the most spoken sentence in the product development. But what I understand is the fact that when we actually, there's always a small delta where when we speak to the customers with our prototype, and then we showed the product after development, there's a different opinion that kicks in. And it makes it wonder, is it really the product? Did we understand the problem statement right? Or is it something that we need to re-look into? And things like that. But it's important for us to have this buffer, that there is definitely a deficit of what we think we are getting from the research that we do and the interviews that we do. This is what you're going to show post the complete development of the product. That is something that we have always understood, and then we approach this problem by stating that this is the kind of problem that we're going to solve. This is where we're going to fit in the product development lifecycle. There are thousands of products that you can use. There are plenty of opportunities for every product to be in, but there are only a few products that stands out in our day-to-day tools. For example, the Trello that we are talking about, be it the Google Docs and the Dropbox. These are the products that we keep using, regardless of the thousands of the product that shows up, just like the Dropbox, just like Paper, just like Trello and whatnot. So that's the kind of opportunity that we see. We started with the market research. We actually looked into a lot of data insights of how and where this problem is, this even a problem that exists in the world. So to give you an idea of the product itself, we are talking about a performance monitoring SDK for a mobile app, or the web app that's going to come soon. But then the way we are looking at is not the ones like probably the Firebase or probably some analytics tool that will show up. But then to give you feedback even before that, we saw a lot of gap having to work with the customers that we see is that they use Android Studio on one device and they get the results out. But then what is something that could help them to get feedback just before going to the Play Store or during your QA lifecycle or probably your beta releases that's going to go. So how are you going to capture necessary metrics for you to solve the performance issues? And that's where we started putting our energy into understand what exactly is the market looking at, what are the kind of tools that exist, how are you, where are we fitting in, what are the kind of features that we need to build, what is the necessary metrics for us to say that this is something that we could build and we could pursue. And with the basic metrics, we started with a prototype and then started looking at uh, parallelly looking at the opportunities in the market. We see that there's a huge amount of opportunities in for anybody who's looking into mobile apps right now. And then you're looking at a very simple mechanism to capture performance metrics just before going to the Play Store to avoid all kind of crashes, memory leaks, and whatnot when it comes to mobile apps. So we didn't actually stop there. We took the prototype and went to multiple stakeholders. So we attended a couple of conferences with the prototype, in fact, to be able to understand whether it makes sense. Is this with the specific audience? For example, our audience were completely developers. So we went to a conference where there are plenty of developers that we can talk to understand if this problem actually existed. So we went ahead and went to a conference, spoke to a lot of developers, showed them the prototype, and got a lot of feedback. And it turns out that there are a couple of things that made it very, very interesting for them to start looking into. And the same day, we actually got more than 50 signups for the POC that we have built, and that actually said, okay, this is something that we want to look into. Not just the signups, people just integrated this, started using it without having to even didn't even consider that this is a prototype or any of that sort. And using this, we actually call a lot more developers in, and we created a questionnaire to talk to developers to understand some specific environment related details, because there is not always the developers or someone who could take the decisions. Instead, it's the organization and the product managers, like all of us, to make the decision whether to use this particular product. So the decision makings are completely different. So we asked such fundamental questions, whether it's going to be suggested by you to the organization to buy a license to get started off to monitor your performance metrics. And then so we also looked into the product positioning of how and where we are going to fit in during the dev cycle. So the fact that there are tools post live, be it the Android Vitals or the Crashlytics or the Firebase for that matter, and there are plenty of Firebases. So the way looking at is, where do we fit in to give developers feedback that they wanted as soon as possible, and that's when it kicked in. And then we started building a team slowly, to be able to use this data to start building the product, and that's when it started full-fledged. So we started about 6 months before, to build a complete product. So we are now in beta, and then we'll be moving out to public. It's public, so people can use it, but then we're looking at collecting a lot more data to understand how people are using it, how are people responding to it, what are the places that people are stuck with. So here is one quick tip, is the fact that if you are stuck at some point in your product itself, then none of the users are going to also understand the place that you are stuck at. So which means if you are stuck, your users are definitely are going to get stuck, and that's the place that you want to start focusing on, start looking at bringing in changes. So so before going to the MVP, so I'm gonna take some questions from from the audience. Is there a place? Yeah. So we have got one question so far. So I'm gonna answer this question if it's possible to get started off with. So can you give me an example of how you check out 4 to 5 products a week, as in product you look at? What are the aspects you focus on, and how do you do it in a bit? Okay, that's a great question. So I also mentioned how I actually look into product. If you see, there's a small top corner. So let me move this side. So you can see this is the product hunt plugin that I keep checking out on a day-to-day basis. So there are plenty of products here that I can browse, and people have been a product and has been the place for any products to drop in, and then start getting a lot of response, feedback, and understanding of how the product works. And this is the place where I go as well. And there are multiple products like Capture and other tools as well to be able to understand. And there's also one more thing that I do is the fact that there is something called Autopsy, which is a which is a website that posts failures startups, the startups which have failed or recently shut down for some reason. Basically, they didn't make through the MVP, or they didn't get funding, or they didn't get enough traction, or they didn't, make good sales, or they ended up scaling. So that is the place where I also look into to see what are the potential problems that we could fall in, and then how do we solve it. So there are 4 things that I focus on. So one is the user experience altogether. How is the product designed? How is the product used on a day-to-day basis? The second thing is the integrations. It makes a lot of integration makes a lot of difference when it comes to products. So the more, for example, if you have a simplest Slack integration to get day-to-day update, even if you don't use the product, but something that keeps pinging you that there's something that's been bothering, even though your users are not active on the product that you have launched, but then you have to keep engaging them with some kind of integration so that they come back to you more often. And then when there is a lightning that struck, then they would definitely look into why something is going wrong. And the third is the fact that the 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 cross functionality. So if you have a mobile app or a web app, so we actually check mails on the laptop, but then we also keep it synced with our phones. And then the notes app, for example, and the reminders, for example. So all these are actually adding, solving the productivity issues of having to go back to a specific device and look into it. Where we say that, okay, do I are my users going to stay in the same place, or are they going to switch between different applications? Do I have enough provision for them to get alerts on a regular basis? So that's the third point. And the fourth point is the fact that what are the how easy is it for us to use any product? So there are a few products that I have it open all the time. Is the fact that no matter I even though I try a lot of products, but then I stick on to something that I think is extremely useful and extremely simple to use, not to have too many complexity. For example, I've used Evernote for quite some time, and from Evernote I moved to a tool called the Simple Note, which has not more than a couple of few probably like 5 functionality, but then I don't want a lot of distraction and showing up a lot of things in my product altogether as part of the functionality. Keep it as simple as possible, and then give me what's required for me. And the most important in all of this is to help any users to think about your product when there is a problem. That's the time we succeed as a product. So when people could think of your product when they're in a crisis or when they're looking at solving some problem. And that's when we made a lot of difference in their life, and also they would come back. They don't mind paying you in any ways. So that's the answer to the question. So I'll also drop some links and everything uh, post the session so that people can refer to probably over in WhatsApp message and with the presentation as well. Right. I think I hope I've answered the question. So we can move on. So going ahead, I'm going to talk about what exactly we are talking about as an MVP is the fact that are we actually building the right product? So the fact that people go with a lot of intuition, but then intuition does not guarantee that you're building the right product. It's important that, so we've got one more question. Okay, how do I? Looks like there's a bug.
No, it's still the same.
It's the same one? Oh,
yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
Okay, great. Why am I not able to close this?
Yeah, I have a question, Abilash. Do you have a synchronization with your email account, I don't know, on your phone?
Yes, I do.
So what about your personal time after work time?
So there is this thing that there's no personal time. We have got addicted to checking our emails more often. So there's always an alert system that keeps us informed. And being a product manager, right? So you have multiple sources, multiple people reporting to you. So there's this FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. That, oh, are we going to miss out some important system? But then there's always a downtime of having to not look into the emails or probably not read it, get to the subjects, but then not go ahead further. But then yes, almost everything is synced with what I use in terms of the notes, in terms of the Slacks, messages and the channels, emails, and then the customer messages. In fact, we do have a chat bot in our websites, which means all of them are completely synced with my phone and the laptop. So there's absolutely no downtime, but it's important at this stage that we are in to respond as soon as possible. Eventually have support systems so we don't have to think about it. And that's what I'm going to talk about as well, of how do we actually set up so everything that we do have to be given to someone else to continue, and then we look at the bigger picture. And that's how usually works in most of the companies where we have a support system. There's a training and everything is set there, and then people start looking into it and build on top of it, right? So but then yes, most of them are synced, and then I use it all the time. So yeah, so jumping on to the MVP part of it, does it have any potential to succeed? So one thing, I went to my management and I told them before going to the conference, I told my CEO and CTO that, hey, I'm going to take this product out and speak to the customers to understand it. Does it have a fit? Does it is it worth taking the time to build this product? And if it doesn't, if people don't respond to it and people don't see a lot of value, people don't add, or people don't sign up for your application, or people don't start using it, so it doesn't make sense for me to go ahead. Probably there's some tool out there that's going to make a lot of sense for them. They don't want to integrate it. And that's when I came back after the conference. It made a lot of sense after gathering so much data. And then we also spent a couple of days or weeks to understand the data that's coming out of the interviews that we are doing as well, to be able to say that it has a potential. Although there is an exception where if you have not built a team and then you're looking at a very initial stage, there's always something that's missing. And then that's something that the customer is going to ask more often than all that you have built so far. That this is the reason prioritization makes a lot of sense of what you need to build at a very early stage to get customers adopted to it. One thing that we have done in the product that is the fact that we have a Slack integration, and we ask them to integrate as soon as we get a response, so that we send them daily updates or probably hourly updates that these are the performance issues that you're facing. Your customers have reported or your users have reported, and these are the memory leaks and things like that, so that they stick onto it. The fact that the stickiness comes from what kind of integration, what kind of things that we prioritize to be able to say that they're going to continue using it. And finding the early adopters. So one of the strategies is the fact that if you're a team that you're looking at scaling, is the fact that the first 10 customers are the ones who are going to teach you a lot more lessons than the entire product cycle. Is the fact that the 10 customers that you're going to find and see how they respond to it, how are they going to use it, will make a lot of difference, will give you a lot of insights of what you need to prioritize, what you need to work on, and things like that. So, and then is it appealing to the users? Is it solving their problem on a day-to-day basis? So these are some questions that we need to ask, and these are some questions that we need to answer to be able to say that it's good to go scale right now. It's good to start building more features. It's good for us to bring in a lot more adopters and the users to be able to get started with the product development. And with this comes also the decision of what are we going to do next in terms of from the MVP, is the fact that do you have the right analytics and the metrics for you to say that these are the 10 things that you're going to do. So here is something that that we did while we are actually while we started with the product development, is the fact that we built a roadmap for about 2 years. That seems quite a long term, but then uh, what we did is, the moment we started getting the early adopters, we started to see a different way and different feedback and insights. So we had to change the way that we have put our product roadmap, and then it started to change. But then we have to make sure that we are actually still on track with what problem that we are trying to solve. And 60% of the time, even though we have built a product for the next 2 years, we almost hit the right questions. We almost got the right feedback to which is which was uh, direct to whatever the product roadmap that we have built. So that gives a lot of confidence for us to start looking into prioritization, what do we need to build, how we need to actually look into the scaling part of it. So if you have any questions on this particular topic, you can just drop me a message. I can take this as well. So moving on with developing a roadmap, right? So developing a roadmap, there's this important thing that roadmap is a set of features that we're going to look at developing for a couple of months from now. But then the roadmap is a lot of other supporting aspects that comes with it. That includes the strategy and the kind of vision that you are building to your product, and then are you sticking on to it, um, and what are your actionable metrics that you get to see on a weekly basis. So we look at 5 different aspects, so which includes the signups, which includes how many people have. So we have divided our metrics into 5 funnels, which starts from the signups. And then we look at whether people have integrated the SDK. And then we look at, if people have integrated the SDK, have they been generating a lot of uh, reports? If people have been generating a lot of reports, are they coming back and looking at the reports and then making some changes to the application? If yes, they're going to upload the next build, which means they're going to integrate the SDK with the next build, which has all the fixes. So these are the 5 different metrics that we monitor to be able to say that what are the changes that we are going to do in the product. that includes that needs to align with a lot of things with respect to the product roadmap. How are we going to scale? How are we going to adopt more customers? How are we going to position our product and things like that. So I also spoke about multiple things, which is develop, design, and integrate. So these three things I put it in the same place is the fact that these are very, very interlocked system that needs to work together to be able to deliver something, be it the product, be it the small features that's going to come in. But then it's important for them to also understand whether this is going to make a lot of sense to the product, and in fact have multiple designs to have A/B done, to be able to get some actionable metrics for you to make necessary changes to the product roadmap that you're going to do. We need to also think about go to market for every small things that we bring in, and how is it going to improve the user adoption? How is it going to improve the user experience? How are you going to look at increasing the conversion rates, from being a free user to a paid user, to a subscription, and etc. So we also look at multiple things like this sales and marketing, of how are you going to position, because most of the time it's the story that matters rather than the product itself. So how are you going to convey your users that this is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then keep reminding them that this is the problem that you're solving. So that repeatability and the consistency will bring a lot of change in the way that you look into product development and the product building part of it. And these are the aspect that initial stage that you're going to look into. You have to take some pieces over the course of product development, being a product manager, to be able to adopt and start, integrating as part of your day-to-day cycle. So moving on. Building the team is one of the most important, probably only thing that matters overall in terms of product building, is finding the right balance of everything that comes across, be it the people, be it the kind of kind of people that you bring in, be it the developer, be it the designer. How are you going to balance them out? How are you going to bring a similar thought process? How are you going to give them the necessary tools and technologies for them to have their own way of building things, but not moving out of the specific goal that's been provided to them. And then there are people who need to think extremely long term, because of the fact that I've seen a quite number of companies where there are more support engineers than the engineers themselves. So the fact that it shows how we have a question here, I believe. Yes.
It's from chat. How did you do your market sizing?
Yeah, so market sizing is a very big topic itself. So we actually looked into the kind of the target audience that we have, and the kind of probably the budget that's going to be allocated to them, and the kind of what what we call is how much the companies, how many companies are going to pay for this particular product, and with the existing product, how are they going to incorporate the product. When it comes to market sizing, is we filter down to a specific kind of audience and the kind of geography that we want to look at. So although it's a SaaS, which means you can go around the world, but then we want to initially start off with India and then move on to a couple of other countries where we have restricted the usage, because of the fact that if you're going to multiple geographies, you need a different kinds of approach and different support systems to be built in. So we looked at. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to answer one by one. So the market sizing is a different genre. So I'm going to share a couple of case studies that we have worked on while we are working on this product on market sizing. So I can share the details with you post this so that we can have a discussion. And just to give you all an update is the fact that although this meetup has been helping us quite a lot, so we have had a discussion of having to pick up a specific topic, have a theme on a monthly basis starting from April, and then have a workshop, have a hands-on session, have a Q&A, and probably bring in someone who can help us speak about a specific topic, and then take it as close as implementing this some on in our product development, or everybody that we are going to work on. So that's something that's exciting for us also. As I've spoken to the organizers, they have been extremely supportive that this team's is going to get us a lot more tangible output in terms of the things that we're going to do. So that's something. So I'm definitely going to talk about market sizing the coming days, and also I can share a couple of case studies for that. How much emphasis was put in core market analytics? Well, so we didn't have a dedicated team to do any of this. So I'll tell you how we split our times to do any of the basic things that I showed you about. Is we had to spend about 3 days for any of the metrics that we are going to look at. So and bring in the necessary support system. So we have an internal marketing team, we have an internal sales team, we have a support system. So we had to bring in all these people to start looking into different metrics to collect the data for us to proceed at any way. So more than how much emphasis there's always, this is the basics. So we need to do it. So we have to do it. We had to do it. So which means there's always been a pressure for us to do this. But then how did we do it made a lot of difference. So we had to bring in the right people at the right time to do this, to get the necessary data for us. So it makes a lot of difference on this. Yes, how much? Is this someone?
No,
Yeah,
it's me, Abilash. So we have 14 minutes.
yeah.
So
So I think we can quickly go ahead and then we can take up the questions. We'll take up the questions, Siddhant and other guys who are Samarth and everybody else, right? So so this on the building the team. So I'm going to quickly jump into the next aspect, which is the go to market. So although I couldn't get a lot of time to work on this particular slide, but then I've just put out some things that were very, very important. So there are a few things that you're definitely going to experiment for sure, because there's always uncertainty of things that could not work more than the things that could probably work. So be it the first few contexts that you're going to talk about. If you're talking about your internal customers, you're going to go and talk about particular customers outside. So it's important that we figure out multiple audience. So when we did our interviews, so we took developers starting from people who have graduated just out of the college to people who have been developing applications for probably 8 to 9 years. And then we also looked at people with experience from a very good environment and very good companies where they get to get exposed to a lot of things, versus the companies who are extremely feature driven, who wants to simply start building out features and churning out. So we had to segment this particular people the same way with the kind of people that you're going to approach in the very initial days. So there are also understanding the pitch and redefining it, because it's important that you can't get the pitch the very first time. So, but then you have to be very clear of the vision that you have and the kind of problem that you're going to solve and you're solving. And also the customer engagement integrations. This is also something that you need to experiment with. I see a lot of products adding, for example, starting from MailChimp to this to that, and then you get too many tools to get data and then make sense out of it. But what you have to do is to limit it to the number of tools that you're going to use to get very precise metrics with respect to the customer engagements. It's very important and very crucial for any products that comes in. And also the sales cycle. So if you're a SaaS, then you need to try out multiple things. If you're B2B customers, where you go show your services or the products. Here we are talking about products, so let me keep it that way. But then if you have a very dynamic product where your pricing and your sales cycle depends on the kind of things that the customers are going to talk about, it means it's going to extend your response from the customers much more longer than it's expected. Um, and the questions, so this is also very important as well, where we talk about strategy, the pricing strategy that you're going to put up for a product, the feature prioritization, the roadmap and the geography that you're going to look at, because there are some companies who are very in need of what exactly you're building. So finding it is also difficult. So most of them here are experiments. So you try out, but then you precisely have metrics that will help you drill down to a specific part of the conversion funnel. And then the communication. So this is where a lot of things changes when it comes to the product, is where how do you actually convey the story to the people, the audience? How do you keep reminding them about what your product is? How are you going to solve the problem? And then, so there are certain, for example, there are certain apps and certain products that keeps reminding you that this is the way you need to look at. This is something that you have. It keeps reminding you of these are the things that's gonna help you use the product. And then the content. So this is very important to drive traffic to your product, or how you're going to adopt it. So it's talk about the blogs, talk about be it the community, Slack channel that you're going to bring in, or specifically, for example, the Product Star Global itself has a WhatsApp and a Telegram channel that keeps us posted, and there's someone who can help us. And that's exactly what even the customers wanted. If we can get some quick response from the product team for the customers, and how are you going to help them? Do you have FAQs? Do you have the documentation? Do you have all this set in place? And things like that. So there are a lot more things. So although I couldn't get a lot of time to work on this, but then we'll definitely be talking more about it in the next time I get the opportunity to talk. So I think we have very few minutes left, but then I'll just.
Yeah, and we have a lot of questions on our side. So maybe let's start from questions we have here. So what specific tools for business analysis you use as a part of understanding market of product? Very briefly.
There are the business analytics. So there are a lot of tools for us. So if I can quickly show you one of the tool that I use. For example, is so if you look into this PM Everything, this is one of the most interesting tool that I've ever come across. Is where we talk about. So there are multiple things here which talks about the carrier, the product itself, which talks about what kind of research that you're going to use, what are the tools that you can use. There are some things that we have done specifically with our product, where we have taken a lot of inspiration from here. Um, be it companies like MailChimp, be it companies like there are successful products out there that has put out their case studies of how they've launched their product and how they're going to bring in a lot of customers in, and how did they identify markets, how did they do certain things. So there are, with this presentation which I'm going to share, I'm going to also share some case studies of the questions that's coming up. So that's also included. So So this is something that you can use. I'm going to share this link as well for you guys to look into. This has got a lot of insights. And then since we are in a very, we are in a very, we are a small team, and then we are releasing some quick features. So I've been not able to push out a lot of blogs that have kept it trending for quite some time, which talks about the first question, the second question, and also how do you keep track of evolving customer persona. Well, so that's something. So when it comes to the third question, someone, how you keep track of evolving customer persona. So since we have funneled our customer to a specific persona, which talks about people, which is the developers. Um, there are different kinds of segments inside that. So there are people who are extremely experienced, who are extremely good at doing some things, and there are people who are extremely new to this particular space. Um, there are certain tools that we use. For example, even the intercom that we use, we ask some questions of what is your background all about, how are you coming from, where are you coming from, and then there is always a call that needs to be there in order for us to understand how the customer actually came back to us. How did they start using it? How did they find out? And what are they doing? How did they think that this would solve the problem? Yes, there are not a lot of tools there. You don't get a lot of response from the customers of where they don't reveal a lot of things. But then it's important we keep checks of the kind of companies that people are signing up with, the kind of questions that we ask when they come to the product, and the kind of uh, the designation that they work with. It's always quite different, but then what we drill down to is, since our audience are developers, we try to see how we can help, how what kind of metrics that we need to measure for this particular customer pipeline, and that's where it makes a lot of difference. um, in with respect to how we actually bring up features, with respect to how we um, engage all the kind of customers that we come in, it's actually quite difficult to attend to each and every customers that comes in. But then there are some things which are basics with respect to the product and the kind of audience that we are targeting. So there are some tools that we use, like the intercom, and then there are lucky oranges, and there are a few other product that will help us understand where are they coming from, how are they coming from, how are they going to use it, how are they using it, and then have a weekly brainstorming session of what is the sessions that have come so far, and then how it has changed the way that we think our customers are, or how the users are behaving at a different point of time. Yeah, so I hope. Um,
Yeah, very, very quick response. And we have 3 minutes and we still have a lot of questions on our website. So
Yeah,
everything.pl
so
is your...
it's not
Yeah.
my personal collection, but then I know this is something that came in the product, and that's so the way I explore a lot of products. This is something that I come across, and then apparently it turned out to be the links also that I've um, browsed a couple of months before, and then there are a lot more data here, but then it's very nicely put out to understand the different path in the career, and the kind of segment that we're looking at. For example, the product execution, the growth, the leadership, and whatnot. So it is free. I can actually share the link. You can search for everything PM, and then you can also reach out to the author and talk to him, ask him some questions. I think we are also looking at bringing him for one of the sessions. That's something that I'll definitely do.
Yeah, guys, I believe we couldn't answer all questions just because we have 2 minutes. How
Yeah.
did you deal with assumptions as a product designer at different stages?
Oh yeah. So we are looking at the questions here, right? So yes, I forgot.
Yeah, yes,
Completely
please.
forgot about the questions.
Yes, right.
Okay. So how did you how to transition from technology team lead to product managers?
Ah,
Yes. So this is a very good question. I'm going to quickly answer this. So I worked with the technology team. There is always the way they think, the approach to solving a problem is completely different with respect to the product managers. So a product manager, if you have to transition, so you have to learn about how the fundamental of the product works, be it the kind of business that the product is in, the kind of user usage that you want to bring in, and the kind of, so there are three different things. Like if you put a Venn diagram, I've seen a lot of Venn diagrams that happens. There's a product, and there is a business, and there is a this customers, and there is sales and everything. So you are an intersection of all these things. So which means you need to know the, apart from the technology is just one part of it, so everything else also comes with it. So which means in order for you to transition there, you need to also start learning about multiple things about the company, about the organization, about the problem that you're trying to solve. How is product manager different from project manager? Okay, so it is very simple question. So I'm going to say that project is something that is well defined, that has already been set, and then so you're managing projects to get to the finish line. Unlike the product manager, there's a lot of turn of events, so you're going to look into multiple aspects of the growth. Also, you're directly contributing to the to the sales and to the kind of revenue that you're bringing in and things like that. So that's a fundamental difference of the project and the product. So if you remove the manager and just differentiate the product and the project, so that's the answer for this particular question. Uh,
last question, please, and very quick response, and we need to say bye-bye to
uh,
everyone.
so I can actually write the questions and send it across.
It could be perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to take all of these questions. I think we are running out of time, so I'm going to save all of these questions. I think we do have access to all the questions.
Yes, we do have.
Yes, so I'm going to take up all of the questions. I'm going to write to them or probably post it on.
Okay, in Telegram, right?
Yes, so
Okay,
that
sounds wonderful.
yeah, so that is something that we can definitely do.
Okay. So Abilash, thank you so much. It was very interesting, and hope to see you again somewhere in the future.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks all attendees for your time, and see you later, and have a wonderful weekend.
Have a wonderful weekend, guys. Take care, stay safe, have fun.
Agree. Bye bye.